And there was a fairly large climatic change since the ice age glacier period was over. The temperature rose, and all the environmental elements were changed, especially the flora, the vegetations totally changed. And not only conifers, 針葉樹ですね, not only conifers, but the broadleaves, 広葉樹, came in quantity. And all those broadleaves include all the trees that bear nuts and fruits. So the food resources were the condition was totally changed towards this period. And naturally, the meat eater, the hunters and gatherers, shifted their subsistence to the botanical resources too, because they are so big in quantity and quality. And so I explained about the change of climate, the change of not only the temperature, but the like rainfall, increase of rainfall, more humidity, and activated ocean current and everything, you know. So ocean resources also were increased by this time. And of course, the increase of vegetation resulted in an increase of fauna, and all the smaller, middle-sized to small-sized animal did flourish also. So it was totally different from a Paleolithic environment. And it was good, of course, it was good for human beings to live, to survive. And at the same time, at the beginning of this Jomon period, they introduced two major revolutionary technology changes. The one is the pottery, of course, and cooking pottery for cooking food or cooking nuts for removing harshness, akunuki harshness, and other purposes. And that changed a lot of the food condition, nutritious conditions, and efficiency of nutritious condition, of course, by eating soup instead of steak, right? And also the introduction of the bow and arrow system, that also changed their style of hunting. And that's a lot more accurate and effective, efficient compared to the spear hunting of the Paleolithic people. And at the same time, they seem to have domesticated dogs, not the other animal, but the dogs. They really lived with dogs from Jomon period. And dogs, of course, probably helped the hunting. And so everything is went up, you know, in terms of quality and quantity. So the quality of life were also changed. And also the important keyword of the Jomon time is the sedentary living. And they settled down and started to make houses and villages. And as a result, they could go into more development of their environment. They stayed there for a while and developed their environment circumstance. So they could develop, they could discover new methods of doing things like horticulture or partial domestication of animal. Not really, but taking care of baby boars and things like that. And probably they did that. And of course, they could grow their own wood or forest, like chestnuts, for increase of food resources. And as they settled down, they had more time, spare time, so they could the time that they used to spend for moving around, they just settle down and use it for other work that requires a lot of time, complicated work like pottery making, or what, lacquer painting. That requires a lot of work and a lot of time too, and so on. And they could own various tools, including very big and heavy tools like stone tools, like oh, oh. It's only a part. It's a broken pieces, but it's a part of the mortar. 傷ですね。Part of the mortar. You see the cross section. It's broken. And this is the end ridge, and there's another ridge going up here, and seems to be oval shape as a whole, big one. And the cross, as you can see, the cross section, this is the area that they could mill the nuts with a round stone like this, milling tool, which they could not carry around in the Paleolithic time. So, well, they didn't have much nuts either. But, this kind of heavy, big tools, and variety, so much variety in stone tools too. Okay. And what? Yeah, so those are the results of sedentary life, starting a sedentary life, settling down. And so much efficiency they acquired that also gave them more time, spare time. And they were not the people who were spoiled by that. They didn't satisfy. They always went forward very positively, try to develop their environment so vigorously, should I say. And that's one of the characteristics of Jomon people. And they also could develop methods of food conservation, preservation, like not only drying meat, but using salt or maybe smoked also, probably, and so on and so forth. And everything looked really, really good, in condition. But still, they were hunter and gatherers. And at this time, around the same time in the world, most of the culture, most of the people went into agriculture. The German people remained as a hunter and gatherer for 10,000 more years. It's really peculiar, but they did. That's the fact. And since it is, they were relying totally on environment, totally on nature. So it wasn't really stable, of course. Their crops and hunting results depends on the season, depends on the natural condition. So it wasn't stable, but they tried so hard to stabilize it. One of the strategy is to expand their choice of food. They have to have a vast choice of food. so that if they couldn't if they couldn't get acorns one year, they could go for others. So the diversity of food resources was one of the major strategy for survival, because they were totally dependent upon the nature. And but of course, it didn't work too good. In the latter half of the Jomon period, the natural conditions went down, declined, because of the decline of the temperature. And the peak of the warm time was around in the early Jomon period. And after that, middle Jomon and late Jomon, latest Jomon, the temperature declined gradually, a little by little. And that really affected the nature, of course. And finally, they couldn't survive in their Jomon style of living methods. So, well, as a result, they went into Yayoi period, the agriculture. They adopted the agriculture finally. But that's a story. I will explain about it later. Okay. Anyway, and expansion of food resources. I talked about that last week. So now I should talk about the material culture. Of course, we have to talk about the pottery. Oh, by the way, let me show you the picture. This is a storage pit that I showed you last week, and some of you were wondering about the actual condition in the Jomon time. And this is the line. This is the surface of the water, undercurrent water. But this was the time when they discovered through excavation, the water was up till here. So we don't really know how much water they had in this pit at in the Jomon time. But even it was higher or lower, it is a lowland, and we're pretty sure that they had some certain amount of water filled in the pit. And because it was closed on top at the entrance, it's been closed by wood and earth and everything. It's been totally enclosed. So if you have certain amount of water inside, there must be a lot of humidity, 100% humidity inside the pit. So they could preserve the nuts and stuffs, of course. And that was the system, I think. All right. Now, talking about the material culture, one characteristic of Jomon pottery is that their design. Of course, I'll talk about it in detail later, but since they remained hunter and gatherer for more than 10,000 years, for a long, long time, and they were pottery maker too, just like Neolithic people. And they had so much variation and change of pottery styles in that long, long time, and depends on the area too. And if you go into the typology of Jomon pottery, you would find over 180 types of Jomon pottery, including many more subtypes. So it's an amazing world. And another characteristics of Jomon pottery is the quantity. They made so many pottery, and I don't know if I showed you, but in the last excavation that ended about a week ago on campus, we found 6 pit dwellings, and from one pit dwelling, we found one smaller pot that is almost complete. It's not broken as a vessel. And, they could just abandon, they could just throw away the unbroken pottery too. And and that could happen, not only in ICU case. It's kind of rare, but normally they're in fragments, but sometimes you find those things too. And why? And that's one of the mystery. And I'll talk about it later too, but they must have had certain condition about pottery making, certain concept about pottery making. And that's the reason why they had to make it so much in quantity. And another thing is that in this Paleolithic period, they were making stone tools. No pottery was made. They didn't know about the pottery. And stone tool making is a technology of subtraction. And you have a original stone like that, and you break it, you flake it and chip it, and by chipping, you make the stone tool. That means you're subtracting part of the stone and finally make one tool. But on the other hand, the pottery making is addition instead of subtraction. 引き算じゃなくて足し算ですね。And you add the clay, you make the base, you add the lower part and middle part and top part. You keep adding the clay. And decoration also, you keep adding. Of course, you can subtract too. If you put too much, you can take it out. But you can make it free, either adding or subtracting. And that's what it is about the pottery. So that means you could express your concept or whatever in your mind pretty much real on the canvas of the pottery surface. It's different from a stone tool. If you chip one fragment from the stone, you can't put it back, right? So it's really difficult to express your thoughts and mind or whatever into the stone tool, but the pottery. So that's quite a different concept of creation, And there is always a question that those over-decorated potteries are so prominent in the German period. And are they daily use pottery, daily use tool, or ceremonial tools, specific tools designed for ceremony or ritual? And we will say, oh, they're all daily use pottery. Whatever that is, what kind of decoration that it bears, doesn't matter. They are all daily use cooking pot. Because, I'll talk about that later too. And we have evidences that they were actually used on fire, because the lower part is red and top part is dark black. And that's the proof of being used on fire for many times. So, but in the later time, in the latter half of German period, they started to make a specific type of pottery that's obviously used for ritual and ceremonies. And because they had the daily use pottery at the same time, they separated their pottery in two groups. And we have to think about the reason of that too. All right. And oh, by the way, this is a pit dwelling, plan of pit dwelling. There's a cross section. And this entire pottery was found from one dwelling. Of course, the pit dwelling was also recycled or reused as a waste place. And after using it as a house, you remove the roof and posts and everything. There's a big hole left there. And they didn't dare go to dig the waste hole, reutilized that hole as a waste place. So they dump everything, garbage and broken tools and everything into the previous house. And as a result, when you go out there and excavate the pit dwellings, you will find all the garbages, all the debris. And so naturally, you will find a lot of potteries because they didn't dump these potteries at once. And they must have a range of time when they abandoned these potteries into the pit. But still you find so many potteries from the site. All right. And about stone tools. And the stone tools in the Paleolithic time used to be like a spearhead, knives, scrapers, and stuffs like that. And those variety totally changed when they went into Jomon period because they lost their spearhead. They never made a spearhead after Jomon period. Or maybe some, but not scarcely. You can find spearhead in Jomon time, but all these arrowheads and chipped stone axe, polished stone axe, of course. Partially they had it in Paleolithic time, but the number of the chipped stone axe, which is a shovel, the digging tool, increased like crazy in Jomon time. It's natural because they had more chances to dig holes, dig ground, because they were settlers, they were sedentary people. They had to make a lot of holes for houses, posts, and burials, storage, whatever. They were always digging the ground. So naturally, they had to have a lot of those shovels. And as I showed you now, this mortar and grinders were required because of the change of lifestyle. They were more into the botanical food resources, such as nuts, and they were milling the nuts into powder. So they had to have this kind of querns or mortar or grinders, which Paleolithic people never had. So all this lifestyle change also resulted in stone tool types too. Oh yeah, chipped axe. These are all shovels, different shapes. But they're basically the same, either this type or straight type, a little wider type on the blade, or more like teardrop type. They're about the same. And polished axe. It's amazing. Yeah, big one and small ones too. These are not axes. You should call it chisels. Nomi desu ne, chisels. They're all designed for woodworking or wood cutting, but these were small ones designed for small works on the wood. And it's amazing to see how beautifully they were polished. You know, you just have to polish the blade. But they're polishing the entire thing, you know, whole thing. And this is really, really interesting. And yeah, some other material like plant stuffs. These baskets woven with a vine, some kind of vines. They had the wild grape and they also had bamboos too, very thin type of bamboos. So the basket weaving was one of their major technology too. They had developed so much elaborate technique in the basket weaving. And these are found from the waterlogged site, lowland site, that preserved the organic material very well. And lacquer work. This actually is a basket woven with a bamboo or something, and it's a really delicate work. It's round. If you see it from the top, it's round, but if you see it from the bottom, it's square, 4 legs. You know, it's really elaborate one. And the basket is painted with red lacquer. And lacquer work requires a lot of time and a lot of work. So they already developed this kind of technology. And the lacquer work in China was so old and very well known from Han Dynasty or even earlier. And we suppose that this kind of technology was introduced from China or mainland. But recently, there's a study on lacquer DNA and stuff like that. They're insisting of the domestic lacquer type, the plant as a plant, and they were not introduced from China. So we don't really know whether the technology came in from continent or not. We're still discussing about it. But the technology is very refined, and it's almost complete. The technique is almost complete, and it's not so much different from what we use today. The lacquer technology is so high at the time, and you had to have this sedentary life to develop this kind of technology, right? You have to have spare time. And let me see. And we also have to talk about the type of tools, what we call the first group and the second group. First group is the daily life tools like pottery and the cooking pottery, and stone tools like arrowheads and axes and stuff like that. But the second group of tools were a specific type of tools, probably designed for ceremony or ritual use. And of course, that has to have a lot of time to be developed. You know, the ritual concepts, ceremonial procedure and everything, has to be developed in Jomon time. We don't really know about those world in Paleolithic time, but there's no evidence about those. But there are so many evidences in Jomon time, which I will show you later. And this is what we call flame pottery, Umataka type, only found around the Niigata area of Japan seaside in the Middle Jomon period. And this is one of the so-called over-decorated things. So you can't really tell what's on there, but it's just a simple form of the pottery with a lot of projecting decoration on in 3-dimensional directions, and those weird handles, we call handles, but they're not actually handles. Decoration projection is attached, 4 of them. And see all this pointed decoration, and they have nothing to do with cooking, actually. And these attachments, round attachments, are not strong enough to hold or suspend the pot, heavy pot. So these are all decorations. And idea about those decorations are so super, what should I say? It's very difficult to understand because they never made a real images like human, well, some, only some, but hardly made the image of a human or tree or animal or mountain or ocean or whatever. They're always abstract. Their designs are always abstract like this. And actually these are the red bottom and black top pottery, which was also used on fire for cooking. You know, it's really hard to cook with those. You don't want to stick your hand in there, but actually they were used, and that's one of the mystery of German pottery, which we will discuss later. Okay, let's see. And a lot of features like this appeared in German time. These are not for daily use. You know, this is erected stone with radiation alignment of stones. It's a part of the stone circle. There are a bigger circle around it, and it's only a part of it. And 4 of the round stones are placed like this. And we don't really know the function of these, but it must be related to ceremonial ritual stuffs. And they're finding some burials right by those. So probably burial practices or rituals are related to these kind of features. This is the only form that we can find in this Akita prefecture, northern part. But there are so much variety of these stone features in German time, especially in the latter half when the temperature went down. And stone rod or column or whatever you call, but these are beautifully finished ones. And you can imagine how much time they have to spend to make one of those. And these are said to be a symbol of male, phallus symbol. And they were also made towards the latter half of the German period. We don't find those in the former half. And so much ceremonial stuffs, ritual stuffs increased in that time. And burial, of course, you can find a lot of burials too. In many cases, those skeletal remains cannot be found, just a large pit. And they hardly put the grave goods in burial in German period, except some exceptions like this. You know, it's I think it's made. The burial was made in a sand dune or something, so it's been preserved well. And 2 adult female, and 1 kid is lying right here, I think. So fragile, you can't really see anymore, but it's bearing this pendant made of jade. It's a jade pendant, huge jade, perforated, so probably it's a pendant right on her chest. And you see a lot of bracelets made of a shell, bracelets on both arms. And this girl too, bearing a lot of ornaments, body ornaments, which is quite rare in German time. So probably these ladies were of this specific position or status, or we don't know yet. But normally we just find a pit, nothing else. Like the site I excavated last spring in Mitaka City, we found a big pit, and good size for 1 human body. So we estimated that this was a burial. And we found several things. 1 fragment of ear ornament, ear plug, 耳飾りですね. And also we found very strange thing. this is it. Oh, wait. This is it. And it's a flat, smooth, flat stone. One end is round, the other is kind of straight. And can you see a very shallow groove right in the middle? Can you see that? Oh, yeah, like that. It's very shallow. And on the other side too. You see that?
Yeah.
This is, we don't know what this is. I've never seen this kind of artifact before. Probably the first example in Japan. It looks like a tongue, but I don't know. It's very specially made. So probably it's one of the great good. And so we took the samples from the fill soil, fill soil, and analyzed. And we were looking for the phosphor, phosphor that contained a lot in the bones. And as a result, we find a lot of phosphorus in the lower part of the pit. And compared to the soil of the area, adjacent area, there was so much rate of the phosphor in there. So we concluded that it was a burial. So normally we don't find these goods in the pit. And sometimes you may find pottery with it, stone tools, but not very much. But we find a lot of burial pits, and they made the burial field, cemetery area in their settlement too. Either center of the settlement or on the outer area of the settlement, they made those burial pits. And we are finding that a lot. And where am I now? The spiritual culture. Yeah, as a result of settling down, they had more time. They had more spiritual spare, surplus. So they had more time to develop their ideas, not only technology stuff, not only materials, but their ideas, concepts of the world was more and more developed. And it is easy to imagine that, and they would add more values to, like this cooking pot with more added value, some guys protecting the content of the pot. This is a reproduction of the real things. It's a small scale, but so that's what they did to pottery and other material culture too. And we are not too sure about the detail of their rituals and ceremonies and stuff, but there are so much material culture, material evidences that indicates those activities too. And naturally, they had this very close relationship with the natural environment. They must have had developed their concept of the world, universe. They had their own explanation about everything, which is not like scientific as we do now, but their own special explanations to the world. And that's probably what's expressed on the canvas of the pottery surface. And that's probably the reason why it's really abstract. It's not reality, but their ideas are really something beyond the reality. So anyway, we have to decipher that later. Takes a lot of time, but you can try that too, of course. And So the concept of the world must have been really, really complicated compared to the previous time, the Paleolithic period, because they had so much time and time to think about it, and to so much time to observe and contemplate and create their ideas, right? And moreover, as I mentioned, there were the people of the forward-going, positive people. So they didn't wait, sitting, doing nothing, thinking nothing. They were always thinking and doing and observing everything. They were so that kind of people, German people were. And also, talking about the spiritual culture, you have to go through all these ornaments, body ornaments, including ear ornaments and bracelets, pendants, and so much evidence is shown in German time. And the meaning of those ornaments are not just a decoration. No, not just like pottery. They're not decorating the pottery for nothing, for artistic purposes. They had meaning, I'm sure. And body ornaments were the same story. They had the meaning of those pendants and bracelets. And probably those were the symbols of certain concepts like lives, power, or certain roles of the person or whatever. But it seems to be that those symbols, those ornaments were not related too much to the power of the people, certain people. And some insist that the classification, social classification, took place in German period, but I do not agree with it. And there's not enough evidence to show the social classification, like accumulation of wealth. We don't find storage house at all. Maybe some, but not for just one person, which contains a lot of good things like jades and stuff like that. We don't find those in German society. And no particular gorgeous house or something like the mansion and things like that. They were living in the same kind of house all the time. Everybody is the same. So we don't really believe of the social classification until Yayoi period. So those symbols were not really related to the power of certain people. And also, when you talk about the German culture, you have to talk about the locality. And of course, the environment are so different among the area, like northern part, southern part, like Hokkaido in the North Island, and Okinawa, the southern island, subtropic island. The environment is totally different, and fauna and flora, everything is different. So they have to develop their own way of living and their own culture, and that was reflected upon their material culture too. Yet they have a lot of things in common throughout the Japan in German period, like pottery culture. They had that same kind of pottery culture in Okinawa too, and Hokkaido too, so on. So, but what is different, what is the same, we really have to look through and think about it, and in order to decipher the German culture. Okay. Okay, good about so much about the German period. One, environment and life in general explanation. Any questions so far? Okay, so let me go into the second one, the German period tools and society. Oh, did I show you all the pictures? Maybe not. Oop, I forgot, but this is very old. Wait. this is a jade ornaments. Almost white, but the slight hue of green in it. This is the type of the jade. The source of this kind of jade is limited to just a very narrow, small spot in Niigata Prefecture, somewhere inland. But that's the only place you can find these. There are some other jade sources in other part of Japan, but they're not. They're very crude quality, and they're not pretty. They don't have green in it. So, and Jomon people really loved this green jade because you can find this kind of ornaments all over Japan, from Hokkaido to Okinawa, even Okinawa, over the ocean. You know, they brought it into Okinawa and into Hachijo Island, south of Tokyo. And in order to go there, I think I explained about Hachijo Island when I talked about the wild boar domesticating. But from the same site in Hachijo Island, they found this jade ornament. They crossed the black current, the very huge, rapid, strong current of black current, over to the Hachijo Island with boar babies and those ornaments and all the Jomon cultural aspects. So it's really amazing, but they really loved this stone. And jade is one of the hardest mineral, second from diamond. So you can imagine how much time they had to spend just to perforate, perforate those fragments and polish the surface, entire surface. You know, they were the kind of people, they had so much energy, so much will, and so much time to do it. Actually, they had this production site near the source. And this site in Jomon site bears a lot of unfinished ornaments, jade ornaments, and also what do you call polishing utensils like whetstone, toishi, and things like that. So that's another story, but okay. And this is an island close to the main island of Okinawa, and it has various Jomon sites. You can see the lagoon, you know, pale blue area is a lagoon, and they have so much fish and shellfish, and some mammals like deers or boars inland. So they had their own way of life. But some styles are really common all over Japan in Jomon period. All right. Let me change the picture. And, all right. So that's the general explanation about Jomon culture, but I will go into the detail of each. So you will see the same picture many times from this on to like this. Jomon calendar. Until late 1970s, we didn't really have much data about the detail on Jomon subsistence, Jomon food resources. But from 1979, 8, 9, around, maybe a little earlier, but they started to excavate one site in Fukui Prefecture. That's a little south of the Japan seaside, northern coast. And this is a shell mound called Torihama shell mound, which is so famous because it's situated by the river and it's soaked in fresh water for a whole time. So all the organic material was preserved in there. So amazing. Even a tiny bit of a fish bone that stuck in your throat were preserved in that shell mound. And I was undergraduate at the time. For the summer recess vacation, I went down to excavate the site for one whole month, and was like heaven. You would see everything there, which you don't expect in other type of sites. And because of and they didn't even waste the soil that excavated. They kept the soil and sent it to the other part of the site, and they washed the soil off, and they screen over the screen, so you get all kinds of tiny, minute organic material like a fish scale and tiny fish bone and everything, seas, you know. One time I was excavating there, and I was scraping the shell layer. The shell is kind of soft. It's the calcium just went out, so shell is kind of soft, and you can scrape it. And I suddenly found one leaf of a maple, Japanese maple, momiji desu ne, which was red, totally red, beautifully red. It looked as if it was just fallen off the tree in autumn time. And it was beautifully red, shiny. And I was astonished because the layer I was digging was 7,000 years old, you know. And as I watched, within 1 minute, it turned black and shrunk because it was exposed to the air and oxidized. So that's the story about this site, the amazing site. And because of their minute study analysis, they could find so much food resources that German people utilized. And this is the result. And of course, by counting the lines, fine lines of the shells, you can tell the season of each layer too. Not only but years, but the season, springtime and summertime. And so that's why they could create this calendar, whole annual calendar of the German subsistence of that site. And as you saw it, well, you saw it before, right? And it's a seasonal. How do you call it in English? I don't have the term, but it's called shun in Japanese. Shun っていうのはね、こういう感じですね。Shun. It's a highlight, high time. The high time of the season, and like you don't want to eat watermelon in the winter, right? It's a summertime thing. That's if you eat that watermelon in summertime, that's shun of the watermelon. So it's the best time to eat. It tastes the best. And those German people were eating shun food resources in every season. They were like gourmet. They were always getting fresh and best food of the season. So that totally changed our concept of the German subsistence, because we were imagining that they must have been just surviving, looking for food all the time and things like that. But it's totally wrong. And this is what we know now. And so much variety, the diversity of food resources is the one of the prominent characteristics of German culture. And reason I talk about the reason, because for survival in the natural resources, you have to have vast choice. And that raises your possibility of your survival. And coprolites, even these were found from those shell mounds. So fossilized droppings. And by analyzing these coprolites, you can also tell many stories about their diet. Sometimes you will find something like a tip of the bamboo shoot, and sometimes animal hair, and sometimes whatever. And of course, fish scales and things, tiny bones are in there too, and they eat them all. You can tell that from the wear of the German people teeth. Their teeth are pretty much worn because they were eating harder material and sometimes sands and things like that too. But anyway, so much study have been done about those organic stuffs from particular sites. Talking about the food resources, let's go for the fauna resources. And of course, the hunter and gatherers, they were hunting still, like Paleolithic people. But the hunting methods are quite different because one is the introduction of this bow and arrow system. And you saw that too. The arrowheads, some of these are really crudely made, It's not really pretty. Look at this one, It's not beautiful at all. Sometimes they can make something like this and this, but not always. Because these are made of obsidian, and obsidian's volcanic glass. Since they're glass, they are very sharp when you work on it. And if it's sharp, even how small they are, it's okay because you got the power of the bow, and that's enough. If it's sharp enough, maybe you don't even have to have a stone tool, arrowhead for your arrow. Just pointed stick would do it. And sometimes, where is it? Here. I showed you. Can you see this? Can you see this arrowhead? This is a standard size for Jomon period, while sometimes they have bigger ones. Okay. Same arrowhead, different material. This is made of chert. This is obsidian, in different size, and a little bit different design too. But this is well made, very well made, while this is not too well made. There's so much variety. But they didn't really care about the technology, stone tool making technology of that time. And it's totally different from Paleolithic people. Paleolithic people were so into making their tools refined, develop the technology, but they don't. It's kind of a decay. It's kind of a disintegration of technology that you could see in Jomon stone tool because they didn't have to, And dog burial, dogs must have helped their hunting, so it's more effective compared to the previous time. And trap pits. I think I mentioned about the Paleolithic trap pits, which is rare, but Jomon trap pits are so popular. You will see, look at this hillside, it's entirely covered with trap pits. not from one period, I'm sure. For hundreds and thousands of years, they accumulated so much remain of those pits all over. So they were active hunters, actually, but they used so much trap pits too, not only bow and arrow, and shoot them directly. And there are several types of trap pit in German time. The standard type is oval plan type, and this is cross section. But you have something like this on the bottom. Stick, remain of the stick standing inside the pit. This is another round type, oval type, but just one big stick maybe standing. And for many years, they explained about those sticks as something like a spear, pointed sticks planted on the bottom, so that when animal fall in, it stab the animal to get them. But I don't think so. I don't agree with that. German people are not that dumb. Probably you can imagine what happens when animal fall in onto the sharpened sticks, and it stabs the body of the animal and can't move, injured and bleeding and everything, and for a certain time it will die in the pit. And trap pit is not the kind of stuff you just make it, dig it, and set it, cover it, and watch it. You don't watch it. You go home, right? While you're not watching, like at nighttime, animal would go around and fall into it. And probably next morning, you come back to the site and you will find the animal in the pit. And by that time, the animal is dead, bleeding, and flies flying around. It's starting to rot. The meat is starting to rot. And that's not what they wanted, I'm pretty sure. They wanted them alive. So as a result, I believe that those sticks were not pointed, just the sticks, And this big one too, this is just a column, blunt column. It's not pointed. They're not hurting the animal. And what happens is okay. See, it's just more. Same. Okay. Well, anyway, you have a stick right there, not pointed. And when animal falls in, like boar, big stomach boar, what happens is the short legs won't reach the floor. They're stuck between those sticks, or just one big stick's okay too. They're stuck between the pit and the column. And the point is that they cannot squat in this situation. They cannot squat. That means they cannot jump. So they can't go out of they can't escape from the pit. They will be just, their legs so hard, but they can't escape. So when you come back next morning, you will see them alive, right? So we can catch them. And also, moreover, if you have a pointed sticks, that will stab the animal, and you will have holes in your skin, in your boar skin. You want to have it clean. You don't have a hole, perforated skin. right? And moreover, you will have a lot of blood if you stop the animal. You don't want to waste the blood. That's one of the most nutritious material in your diet. It includes a lot of salt, mineral, vitamins, and everything. You have to eat it. You have to eat blood too. You don't want to waste the blood. So that's the reason why I believe that these sticks were not sharpened, pointed. And you can catch them alive. That's the point. And also, and how about this one? This is the other type. This is an oval type. But as you go down, it's narrowed to very fine, it's not fine, but very narrow groove like area at the bottom. And this is different type. Probably we think that these were designed for like something like deers. You see, this type of, we find a lot of these in Jomon site or close to the settlement site, but outside the settlement. And wider at the top, narrow at the bottom. And this is what happens when you go in there. You can't move. Your long legs stuck in there in the narrow space. And you can't move. You can't squat. So you can't get out. Cross section is like that. So Y shape. Oh, I don't know why some people call T shape, T pit, but something like deer, big body. And long legs stuck in there. So he can't move at all. And you can get him alive. Yeah. And this is more advanced type. Let me show you the big whiteboard. This is more advanced type of the trap pit compared to this one. This one was popular, but this is more advanced technology, I think. Why? What's the difference between these? Can you tell? You don't have to install those sticks for this one. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, but there are some cases with the oval drop it without evidences of sticks, nothing in there. Or you can jump it off from the simple dugout pit. In those cases, probably they put branches, tree branches and sticks, you know, or branches like that, a little thicker branches. So it's the same story when boars fall into the pit. The legs will be stuck between those branches and twigs, so you can't move. So probably this is a way they use this kind of simple pit. But how about this one? What's the good thing about this one? You don't have to use those sticks or install the sticks or install these kind of branches. You don't have to do anything, just dig the pit. The important thing is this area. For those one, you have to dig entire pit, right? Dig out the whole thing. You don't have to dig this part, right? So you will save more time and energy by making this type of Y shape or T shape pit. So it's really more effective and efficient and energy saving type of pit. So they were, well, it's obvious that they were constantly thinking and trying to develop their technology, even for trap pits, you know. All right. And also what you find is deer whistle, it's made of bone, and it's a whistle. You blow it, and you won't hear much sound. It produces a very high frequency of tone, and that only only the deer can hear. And the sound imitates the voice of the female deer in their so that by blowing this in the mountain, the male deer would be attracted and come to you, believing that there is a female deer waiting for him. And so you catch them when they come. And amazingly, this is an artifact found from Jomon site, but this type of deer whistle has been used for many, many years until quite recently. Probably somebody still use it, deer hunters. You know? And the modern deer whistle looks just like this, exactly the shape, same shape. So it's really amazing. You know, they had this long tradition of technology from Jomon time, isn't it? Okay, let's have a break for about 10 minutes. And before that, do you have any question so far? Okay. All right. Let's have a break for 10 minutes. We'll come back like a 4:40, a little before that. All right. Forgot to record it. Okay. Once more. Okay. In gourds and perilla and other a certain kind of plants were taken care of. It's like horticulture. It's not agriculture. You don't make them in a big scale. You know, like agriculture is the work that every member of the community has to be devoted in, take part in, and you plan it for annually, and you make it in quantity in a vast land. That's agriculture. But this kind of very small scale growing is called horticulture, I think. And those gourds in perilla are quite important for Jomon people. Gourds were edible, but I think they were used for a liquid container like canteen, suito desu ne. Or when you split it vertically in half, you can use it for scoop. ひしゃくのようなね、形ですからね。You can scoop your soup or stew with the gourd, dried gourd skin. And perillas, these were edible. Perillas are edible. The leaves and seeds are edible, but the major purpose of growing perilla is to use the oil, perilla oil from the seeds. You squeeze the seeds and get the oil. And those oil is ideal for diluting the lacquer. Urushi no yoeki desu ne. And we still use perilla oil for diluting lacquer in today's technology too. So, and those perillas and gourds are very difficult to grow I mean, it's not difficult, but you have to take care of it. Every morning you go out there and take worms off the leaves and things like that. Otherwise, it's gonna be eaten out. So that kind of positive development of natural resources, food resources, so prominent in Jomon time. And we are finding a lot more. We are finding beans nowadays. We are finding beans, green beans, and so many other stuffs too. And so that's what they really. There used to be a theory about the Jomon agriculture, because they're finding a lot of those seeds, charred seeds and stuffs, and also some of the stone tools. They claimed that agricultural tools, but it's not actually. And well, of course, they can use those tools for horticulture too. So, but there's no evidence of a big scale growing of plants like agriculture in Jomon time. So they remained in a small scale, but still they were very aggressively developing those technology too. And how about the ocean or fisheries, fish resources, water resources? They're finding a lot of hooks, fish hooks. These are example from the incipient period, the very early Jomon period. And it's from the cave up in the mountain area of Nagano Prefecture. And it's a really simple J-shape hook with no part that you can tie the line on. It seems like it slips out very easily, but I mean, they must have had certain way of gluing or attaching the lines to it, and they have no bob. アグっていうんですかね。返しっていうか、bob, no bob. So no fish hooks with no bob is very useful too, because bob is good because when you catch the fish with a hook, it doesn't go off and stays in the mouth of the fish. But at the same time, it's really difficult to take it out if you have the bob. So when you're a good fisher, when you are a good fisher and catch the fish, and immediately you can release the hook out of the fish if you don't have the bob like this, so it has a merit and demerit. So, and there are some materials also found from the same site, and these show the process of making the hooks. These are the fragment of the bones. You see the curved shape of the material, you see. So obviously from the beginning of the Jomon time, they were aware of the food resources in water. These were used in river, way up in the mountain area. But at the same time, the ocean, marine resources were so prominent, because one of the reasons is the rise of the temperature resulted in the rise of the ocean level. And since Kanto Plain, this Kanto Plain, including Tokyo, Kanagawa, Chiba, and Saitama area, is a huge basin, a very gentle slope basin, the largest one in Japan. And so the slope is very gentle. It's not like other area with mountains and hills and cliffs and stuff like that. So gentle. So when the water, the ocean water comes up, the water goes way into the inland because it's gentle, it's so fast to go inland, way up. And deep, as I explained before, these triangles, black triangles, indicates the location of shell mound that must have been created along the coast at the time. So if you connect those shell mounds, you will see the shoreline of that time. Right? And so this kind of environment, this area that water comes in a gentle slope, you will have a very shallow sand at the bottom of the ocean. This is shallow ocean, and water is very warm because it's shallow, and that's an ideal environment for shellfish to grow. So this area, they could catch a lot of shellfish, and these the results, the shell mounds were formed along those area. So they had more and more food resources in the water. So Fukui Prefecture. This is the Torihama shell mound that I told you about. And you see the layers and layers of these shells and soil and other material. Stone weights. This is very simple tools, stone tools, flat, round stones that you can find anywhere, even today. But it has a crack on both end. The both end is flaked, and it bears kind of notch, so that you can tie a cord around it and it won't slip out. And probably these were used as a weight of the fishing net. You could use it, of course, for other purposes. The weight for weaving a mat, floor mat, or something like that. And of course, they were I'm sure they were used for fishing net too. The fishing net at the time was made with plant fibers, right? And plant fibers net would float in the water, and you need to attach those weights at the bottom of the net, and so that net will be set straight and catch the fish. And these are other kind of weight used, made with pottery fragments. Broken potteries were recycled into those weights. You see the notches on the end. And pottery is a heavy thing, so even the fragments would function as a weight too. And fishing gears. A lot of fishing gears we find from the shell mounds were not in the normal soil, volcanic ash soil. They will just decay away. But from the shell mound, these are coated with calcium from the shell. So bones and stuff are preserved so well in the shell mound. And these fishing gears, tackles, were mainly made with antlers, deer antlers. 鹿の角ですね. And these are harpoons, all harpoons. And these are hooks. They're big ones, Sometimes it's like over 3 inches, 4 inches. And they don't look very sharp, because the Jomon time fish hooks are not designed to stab the mouth of the fish. But probably some of you who like to eat fish would know very well the construction of the mouth of the fish. It has a lot of opening between bones. And you hook it, literally you hook the mouth of the fish, and those points would go through the opening of the fish mouth. So it's not stabbing, but it's hooking, really hooking the fish. So, and a lot of these were made in German time. And these hooks are one of the earliest hooks, fish hooks, ever made in the world. And they're so complete. There are various types. It depends on the shape and size and designs, but they're so complete, beautifully made. And some people still use it today, and they can catch fish with those. You know, it's amazing. And those harpoons, various types of harpoons you can find, and the simple ones would be just a stick, but these are very interesting ones. You see, it's not straight; it's kind of bent. You see, this one's bent. You see, and this is not. You have a reason for it. And these are not the harpoons to stab the fish either. I'll show you. Actually, these are used in number, not just one. Well, I'll just exaggerate it. This is a basic form of those. And you use one more or two more of these. I'm not good at drawing. Just like that. Maybe two or three of these would be attached to the haft, tied here. You see this round part. The strings, cords will stay there and don't slip out. And by using this, like Poseidon's, harpoon, you don't stab the fish, but the fish will go in there. You pinch the fish by stabbing it, and take it. Sometimes the barbs are inside, so it's easier to catch them, right? So okay, so these are the kind. You see those notches for tying onto the haft. You see those round part prevents from slipping out. And other types, these types, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those two, they have a hole underneath so that you can stick the haft into the harpoon and you can take it out, releasable. And they always have something like this. Can you see this notch, slight notch, or a very thin part? And this is notch, slight notch, here and here too, you see? And there's a thin part where this is a notch too. This is where you can attach the rope cord or string or whatever. And this is a type of harpoon that you can release from your haft. You put it at the end of the shaft, and you tie the cord and you hold the cord together and stab the fish and pull it, and the harpoons will stay in fish body, and the stick will be released, and you're still holding onto the cord rope, so you can catch the fish by pulling the cord. You see, that's another strategies. And these three of them, they're stone tool, the arrowhead on top, and you see a black tan right here. This is a remain of the tar. That's the gluing material. You have notch and at the top of this antler harpoon, and you stick the arrowhead inside and you glue it with the tar, natural tar. And these are not designed for fish. You don't have to have arrowhead to catch fish. But these were designed for sea mammals like seal, ね、アシカとかオットセイとか. There are sea mammals in the northern part of Japan, in the northern sea, colder area. And you have to have this kind of sharp tools to stop their thick and strong skin. So in Hokkaido and Tohoku area, the northern part, they were using this kind of particular type of harpoons to get the mammals, not the fish, right? And this is fish bone from Sannai Maruyama site up in Aomori Prefecture. It's a famous site. And these bones are so big. You know, this is a porgy snapper, madai desu ne, tai desu. And reconstructing the size of the porgy from these bones, it would be over 1 meter. Huge snappers that they were catching. And it doesn't mean that they were a specific species, big species at the time and extinct, but it's the same species that we eat today, we catch today. We are taking them too early. We are catching them in quantity so much when they're young. And if you leave them for many years, they will grow like this. And that's what happened in Jomo time. They had more resources, of course. And vessels, dugout canoe. And those were made of tree. And you have this polished axes to work on. And they could make, they are finding more than 100 of these vessels all over Japan. So obviously they were paddling around on the water area, either ocean or inside water area like rivers and lakes. And it's really simple. It's a simple boat and a very shallow boat too. If you make it from a tree trunk, you split the tree in half and you dig it out. So naturally, what you get is a very shallow boat. In later time, they will develop to add boards onto it. So you will have deeper boat that bears high waves of the ocean, offshore ocean. But they didn't have this in Jomo time. So it's a shallow boat. It's just like the boat canoe that they use in Amazon today, even today. It's really shallow. And those shallow boats are not very stable. It's very easy to trip over. And so obviously they would not go into offshore too much. They couldn't go out from, they couldn't go too far from the land. And when they use that on the ocean, they must have used in the very close area from the coast. And not only fishing, but they could use it for transportation, of course, either river or ocean. And especially ocean, it's really effective because it's a lot easier to move around than walking on the land. And you can also carry things. You can load it up. The float ability of those dugout canoe is very excellent. It floats well, and you can load the canoe with a lot of material, heavy material, and you can ride maybe 3. The regular size of those canoes are like 6 meters, 20 feet. And you can ride like 4 adults at a time or something like that. And it's still floating. And it's really excellent vessel, but easy to flip. And so you can't ride that into a high wave. So you just stick to the coastal area and up and down. And uh, I will talk about it later, but there was so much communication between the area in Jomon period. And much of those were done on ocean, I think, because it's a lot easier than on land. And puddles, it's been found. Very simple puddles. And this is a picture that describes the tuna fishing. They fish tuna and bonitos. Those are pelagic fish, 海遊魚ですね, pelagic fish that comes around, swims around the Pacific, the entire Pacific area. And when they come, you have to go out offshore and hunt them. And we are sure that they were doing this because we are finding a lot of bones of those tuna and bonito from the shell mounds too. And how could they catch those huge and heavy things? I've done bonito fishing many years ago with a modern tackle and a fishing rod and reel and everything, heavy lines and lures and everything. But it was so hard. It was just about two feet bonito. It's a regular size bonito. But it was so hard to pull them out. They're so strong. They're constant travelers. They all hold a whole lifetime. They're swimming. So it's really hard. And on that dugout canoe, unstable dugout canoe, you're risking your life just to catch one of those. And you would hook it like this with a big fish hook and bring it up to the surface. I mean, those guys are surface swimmers, so you can always see them from the ocean surface, but they will use harpoons to get them finally. You have to risk your life. And I really wonder why they had to do this. They had more smaller fish resources, animal on land, and nuts and other resources that you can use. And enough food, you don't have to do this. But they went out to the sea, risking their lives. And that's one of the things we have to really think about, the reason why. Okay, and probably I think that they must have had other reasons than catching food. They could have had social value for those specific food resource. And probably one of the passing ceremony, it's a possibility, but there's no evidence for that. But I think it could be one of the passing ceremony, 通過儀礼ですね, for like boys to be adult men. You have to catch one of those with the help of other adults, and you risk your life and get one, and you will be admitted in your community or something like that. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare go there and catch this kind of things. So there may be other explanations too, but in other methods of this is a river fishing. It's a trap. Eri と呼ばれますね. It's called eri in Japanese, but this is a fishing trap. And the stream direction is wrong. This is not the direction. This has to be down. The stream comes down from top to bottom. And the river fish, trouts and other river fish, they are always facing upstream. Do you know why? Carps and whatever. Most of the time they're facing upstream, and they're swimming against the stream flow. The reason why is that they're always looking for the food that comes to them on the flow of the stream. So they always have to watch the upstream, right? Insects or fish eggs or whatever that floats down, they're trying to catch them. And this is the nature of the river fish, and they knew about that, and they made this kind of trap, R-shaped trap. The fish would go swimming into the trap, and they can't go back. They can't find this way back, and they will stay in this area. So as you go down, you will see a bunch of them stuck in there. And these are kind of the traps that they must have used. Or same as those trap pits, you know, they developed various methods of catching fish in an efficient way. And this is another trap. This is the later period. It's not the Jomon time, maybe Yayoi period, but this triangular trap is called uke. It's a basket, actually. Also set in the river bed. The tip is on upstream direction, so the fish would go in there, right there, and can't come back and stuck in there. You know, this kind of traps. A lot of traps they must have used. Okay, it's 5:30 already, but by the way, since this class is subject to this virus trouble and so irregularly scheduled, and talking about the content of my lecture, I'm kind of behind. So I need to speak more. So I expanded the meeting time from 2.5 hours to 3 hours. And is anybody who has to get out now, 5:30? You have another plan? It's okay. Well, I'm not talking to 6. That's not my idea. But let me talk a little more about that, this food story. Is it okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody? If anybody has to get out, I'm recording this and I'll put it on YouTube later so you can see that too. Anyway, so out of the fishing, there's a various type of fishing: inland, river, lake, and I wrote the classifications, but you don't really have to worry about those. I talked about the pelagic fish and sea mammals, okay, and traps. And poison. Actually, there's no evidence of a poisoning fishing. You know about the poisoning? You put the poison into the river, and that would spread along the flow and will not kill the fish. It's not a strong poison to kill the fish, but make them numb and intoxicated or something. You know, they would just can't move in floats. And somebody's waiting at the downstream and catch the floated fish, something like that. That's one method. It's been used until quite recently, not quite recently, but it's prohibited now. You can't do that now by law because it's so effective. You know, you don't have to work. Just find a weak poison from certain kind of plants and smash it and just soak it in water. Then you can catch the fish. And I'm pretty sure they found this kind of methods too, because they were that kind of people. You know, they were so aggressive and positive about developing their technology. So probably they would do that. All right, so much for fishing. And let me talk about this process and preservation, and I will quit. All right, this is the reconstruction of the processing, milling the nuts on the mortar and grinding stone. And you've seen that too. They had ways of preserving material, like storage pits. Oh, wait a minute. That's all. Huh. That's all I can show you for the storage. And for process and technology, I've already told you about this, removing harshness by boiling, harshness of the nuts by boiling, and water soaking, and this way and that way. After boiling, you can soak it, or before boiling, you can soak it too, like this one, this storage bits. And and for preservation, you could use pottery, of course, and you can make shelves in your house. That would give another effect of smoking too, if you build fire inside. And for the preservation of the raw material, food material, there will be, they must have done this drying technique in Paleolithic time. You know, the meat, the big game meat, they can't eat it at one time, so they must have cut them in pieces and dried it so they can preserve and they can eat it while they're moving, and you know. So they must have done that, and of course, Jomon people too. And smoking, that's another possibility. Too bad we don't have the evidence for that. But if you store the food on the shelves near the roof of your house, you know, it's going to be naturally smoked, and smoking would preserve the food very well. And salt, you have to have salt. If you're living by the ocean, you could get natural salt. You know, you pick up the seaweed on the beach, and it's full of salt, and you can shake them out. In certain time, in certain period, in certain area, in northern Kanto, along the coastal area of Chiba and Ibaraki, there are some specific type of pottery that must have been used for salt making. There are very crudely made pottery for Jomon pottery, and many of them are really broken into tiny pieces, very fragile, because they were used for salt making. The salt water goes into the body of the pot, and when it's dried, it crystallizes and it pushes the body, the clay of the pottery, and naturally breaks the pottery in pieces. So you don't find the decent type of pottery of the particular ones, salt producing potteries. And that was only carried out for a limited time and limited area. And we don't really know why, but it was so much of time consuming and so hot. You have to build a lot of fire, and you know, you can't do that always. So maybe they gave up. And also inland, you may be able to find rock salt, mineral salt, isn't it? But you don't really have to have salt itself. Salt taste could be obtained from animal blood or fish, of course, dried fish, soaked in seawater and dried, and it would taste salty, of course. So they were not really into the salting for preservation method, I think. All right. So let me talk about this material culture, pottery and stone tools in a more detailed manner from next week. We have what? Only 2 more lectures. Oh, wow. 2 more lectures. Can I finish them all? I don't know. Okay, maybe next week, June the 5th, I will talk longer, maybe till 6 o'clock. Well, depends on how fast I can go, but please be prepared for that. You know, we have to catch up. And anything else? Any question?
No, it's okay.
It's okay. All right. Let's see. All right. And all right, great. Anything else? I talked about the report. Yeah, I'll announce about the final report pretty soon, by the beginning of June. Isn't it? I think the final date is the 25th. I'm not too sure. Do you know the end of the semester is the 25th? It's the final day of the exam, right? So that'll be around that area, a little before maybe, will be the due for the report. So maybe you should start working from now, looking for the particular topic. And the grade point will be, grading point would be the same as your first week, 2 weeks essay. And please enjoy studying it and writing it, and let me know about it. Not just a complete compilation of knowledges. You observe and think like Jomo people. Think well and find a creative thinking. I mean, results, if you can, and that will be very amusing for you too, and for me too. All right, that's about it for today. Okay, let's call for the day.
Okay.
All right. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.